All right. I'm here with Sanchit Arvind. And the last time we did a podcast episode together, it was on the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari. And that was one of two of his books. And this one that we're doing now is called Homo Deus. And we're recording this at Dickens and Lincoln Avenue. Mm-hmm. You can probably hear the fountain behind us. So there's this big fountain. Earlier, a dog was walking through it, swimming through it. You got the cicadas. I think that's what they are.
Cicadas,
They're
yeah.
over here. And so we're just going to talk about this book called Homo Deus. For me, this has been, when I first read this book, it just like, you know how people say like it blew their mind?
Yeah.
This is probably the closest book to like blowing my mind. So much so that after I read it, I started making my moves in life a lot differently. Kind of like, as someone who loves, I'm kind of like a romantic. I love the past. But then I'm like, oh man, I gotta prepare myself for the future. So
I think he even claims in there to hope that this book gives you a bit of a broader understanding about the future and its possibilities. So you can change some of your behaviors or adapt to it or do whatever you want, right? Make you a little bit aware of the new realities that we as a species are coming to terms with.
Yeah, and why don't we, so we both have the book.
Yeah, true.
See, I'm someone who doesn't like the book covers.
What? Why?
It gets, I don't know.
It's a bit floppy, right? I see that.
Well, that one, turn over so I can see it. That one's not too bad. I don't like all these multiple colors, like the green or blue in there. I don't like that. I like the monochrome, like the dual colors. So this is, it wasn't actually my choice. I bought this used and it didn't have it. So that's why it's like this. But yeah, why don't you give a brief summary of Homo Deus?
400 pages, sure.
Yes. 400 pages. Briefing the history of the future.
Okay, so it starts off summarizing kind of the contents of his previous book, Sapiens. We have managed to turn the problems that we have lived with for about, for 69,000 years of our history into manageable problems. And those problems are famine, starvation or hunger or destitution, anything of that sort. And
this is his
war.
agenda.
Yes, yeah.
For 69,000 years, the human agenda has been famine, war, and disease.
Disease and starvation, yes, yeah. And how do we deal with those? And that has always plagued us, right? For all of our history. But now we are in this the precipice of a moment, or we are in this moment where it's not a problem of a potentially disastrous scale anymore. Yes, there are still famines. Yes, there are still wars. Yes, there are still diseases. I feel like that one we can talk about. But usually, I think his point is that it's not an uncontrollable phenomenon that we must bow our heads down and pray to the Almighty to cure. It's not because the stars are misaligned. It's not because you made some bad choices in your past. It's because there was a certain group of political leaders, a certain kind of political class that mismanaged the situation.
Yeah.
You see that with COVID a lot, at least with the blame game of, whose fault is it? Why are cases rising? Why are deaths rising? And so on and so forth. You see it with famine as well. When there are these diseases, it's not because we lack the means to solve it. It's because someone made the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, having said that, where does that put us? What are the new challenges that humanity 2.0 is going to face?
So now, what are the three things on the human agenda today?
What are the three things on the human agenda today? And to do this, he starts by saying, okay, what are the ideologies? What are the stories that we've told ourselves for all of our human history, or at least the recorded part, and in terms of how we dealt with things like this? Because we did make progress, right? So how did we get ourselves to do that? And he gets into just religion in general. And he defines religion as and I might get these three wrong, but it's like a combination of an ethical judgment and a factual statement that results in a way that we have to behave. So ethical judgment, humans ought to obey God. Factual statement, God said that homosexuality is bad. Behavior, we should not practice homosexuality because God said it's bad, and we need to listen to him or her. And so, okay, if we define a religion like that, he'll draw on various religions, that we are familiar with: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever it may be. And then he also draws on liberalism, and he says, okay, this could also be understood as a religion. It's just one that kind of took off when science and industry took off.
Yeah, like humanism. He has a lot to say about humanism.
So you beat me to it, but so he'll start liberalism, which I thought that was a surprising one, because you don't think of this as a religion, right? But that's his point, is that if you can distill any ideology down to those three things, right? Combination of ethical judgments and factual statements that result in some sort of way that humans ought to behave, that would be a religion, some kind of dogma. So liberalism is one, capitalism would be another, communism, Nazism, and then finally this humanist agenda. And I think the way he describes this is humanism is this overarching religion now that we have, that liberalism, communism, capitalism are all flavors of. Kind of like how old religion, or like Godism, shall we call it, for lack of a better word, theism, right? Theism had flavors like Christianity, Islam, and so on. Humanism has these flavors that have been in contention with each other.
So he's not confident that humanism will exist in the future, right?
Right. So
there's a new God.
Yeah. I hate to break this to you, but yes.
So the scientific revolution happened.
The Industrial Revolution happened.
Yeah.
That led to this kind of marriage between science and religion that led to us sanctifying human will and human being, human emotions and human senses, and championing that and placing that at the top of the pyramid. And that's what we need to kind of revolve around. And he's got this amazing section about the consumer is God, right? So it doesn't matter how you treat your chicken. The point is that you're able to sell it, right? And so why we just accept that our will is is sanctimonious thing, right? And what we would like and our benefit and human life is sacred, right? And that is the core tenet of the humanist religion. Then what he does is he tries to extrapolate so after spending a lot of time discussing what the goals of this humanist agenda would be, what humanism is about, he tries to extrapolate and take it to its natural conclusion. What would the world look like if we truly did realize the goals of humanism in the way that we are doing right now? So the goals of humanism for him are to maximize happiness. Makes sense, right? We've seen this across history. People write about this. Aristotle wrote a bunch about this. Buddha had a bit on how you really escape desire, and that would be the way to actually be completely happy. So if you pursue these, so maximizing happiness, maximizing human life is another important one.
So humans want to live happier, longer, and
better. I think I think that's the third one. It's your biological functions just would be enhanced, which I think is a part of the immortality goal as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So healthier, happier, longer.
Healthier, happier, longer. Yeah, exactly.
That's what humans want now.
So if you take these to their natural conclusion, given the trends that are going on right now, where would they go? And so that last section of the chapter is this Black Mirror-esque, dystopian end to the humanist agenda. And I think his point is that we'll replace ourselves with something that is just more powerful or beyond, right? And the two branches I think that he calls are this Techno-Humanism, which Techno-Humanism is the useless class will come in over there, where you have so you've always had castes and classes in history, that were rooted though in some sort of myth that we told ourselves, right? European aristocrats would point to the veins on their arms. This is crazy, and say like, "Oh, I have red blood, blue blood flowing through my veins," but peasants have red blood, and that's why we're better. But now what? So that's a myth, right?
Yeah.
But if there's actually a biological separation between, and that's where the techno-humanism goes, right? You enhance a body. So
yeah.
And the other one, which I think is the more interesting one, is the dataism religion. And
Yes.
so this is, if you've seen the show, damn, I can't remember what it's called, but it starts with this: "You are being watched." It's this someone
Sounds like every sci-fi.
So someone post 9/11 decides that it's never going to happen again and creates this AI that is capable of watching and identifying like terrorist acts before they actually happen. But they overdo it, and turns out the AI sees everything, including ordinary citizens and when and how they could lose their lives. And so something happens, and the creator of this teams up with a CIA agent. It's like a typical network show, in that
Okay.
they teams up with a former CIA person who's supposed to be dead to stop ordinary people from losing their lives and save their lives. But dataism is, I feel like it's kind of an extrapolation of that, where we'll start to value the collective human experiences, collect all of that, and use that to drive all of our decision making. There's no will, there's no humanist desire
There's
and
no
will.
single individual. It's
Yeah.
just a collective.
Yeah,
human.
that's a great quote that he'll have, is there's no individual implies that one cannot be separated, but what biology has taught us about ourselves is we're actually made up of a ton of individuals. Like we are all, you can divide every single emotion that you feel into like a sequence of either deterministic processes where I felt something before and now, or some external factor, or just random stuff like that, just neurons firing in a certain way that leads you to do something. But that's algorithmic in some sense. And so if we take all of that info and pool it in this one place, that through AI and ML, that stuff gets stronger and better and more accurate, right? At learning of things about what you want, and why would you then listen to your own will? If this is based on, like, your data is only your data. If I pull it in with everyone else's, it would be better, right? And so that's the dataism religion, which I enjoyed that chapter.
So something this has been a while since I read this book, and when I read books, I don't necessarily retain the information.
Sure.
I just remember, like, what did I take away most from this book, and then I take actions moving forward.
Okay.
But I do recall there being a point where he's talking about dating, and there's like so say the computer system or the algorithm inside of you, say I go on a date with Jane, and then I went on a date with Lisa.
Yeah.
I might be more physically attracted to Jane, but the algorithm is telling me that based on all these other things I know about you, Lisa is the better fit for you. So then it's like there's no action. It's like all an algorithm.
The key, I think, to that thought is, okay, so I remember exactly this
Yeah,
section.
so it's
actually,
in that book. Okay,
yeah,
I'm not thinking this is something
so the way he'll explain that is, you're right. Okay, so the first part is Jane, Lisa. The question is, who do I go to, right?
Yeah.
And if you were subject to the whims of yourself, right, you would say, oh, Jane is more attractive, so I pick Jane.
Yeah.
What if you could ask Google or your assistant, Alexa, hey, who should I pick? Well, I've been gathering all this information about you. I read your emails, I read your texts. I noticed that your heart rate skips a beat when you talk to Lisa. I noticed that when you come home, you're a little bit, the tone in your voice is just a little bit higher and happier. You're whistling sometimes when you come from a date from Lisa. Versus with Jane, you sound a little bit jaded. I know that from your water intake that I collect through your, biometric, this thing that, okay, you're just healthier, I think, when you're with Lisa.
Yeah.
And I know that you think that you are more physically attracted to Jane, but I also know that on average, all humans, it's like 15% is the total weight that is assigned to actual physical attraction.
Yeah.
So I don't think it will be that good of an idea for you. It's not you making this algorithmic decision, right? It's Google, just based off of all of it, all of the
Google
information
or
that
whatever.
whatever. Yeah. Whatever.
yeah.
Principle. What is the principle here, right? Some algorithm given enough info is just going to be better at giving you that advice. And so he describes these things in three ways, right? So first, let me see if I remember the words. The first is the oracle, right? Which is this.
Mm-hmm.
I ask the oracle for advice. The three faiths will tell me, oh, this is the path that you should go on. And I'm like, you know what? That's a good idea. The oracles used to be based in scripture. Then they used to be based on laws, right? And what collective humans have decided. And now it's just data. Okay, so the first step of this is the oracle. We are here. It's a very infant stage of this algorithm. So the next one is the agent, right? Where I actually think of this as think like Tony Stark. What's his? Yeah, right.
Yeah. The thing.
Not Baxter. The guy who becomes Vision, right? That guy. So that he makes half of Tony's decisions for him because he's the agent. Like, sure, maybe take out Tony out of that equation, but that thing is, if you had a CEO of a company that had that thing with it, it's totally capable of just making half your decisions for you, right? And you would actually defer a lot of the decision making to that and retain very little will. So one is I seek out advice and I receive it and then act on it. The second stage is there are a set of things that this is just going to decide automatically for me as part of just because I know that it's better. But you still kind of retain final ownership of the final decision. I think the third stage, I forget the word that he uses. It's oracle, agent, and then it's just a replacement. And I can try to find the section here.
And this is not just dating. It's like, hey, based on your metrics right now, instead of watching TV, you should play saxophone right now. Well, you should do this or that to get your body to do this.
Right. And okay, so I think he'll open this entire section with okay, so what's the problem with you making the decision, right, about this? Right now in this humanist religion that we have, we trust ourselves to do a lot of this decision making. We say that when I make a New Year resolution to go to the gym every day, whatever it may be, I'm doing it because it's in my best interest. But a lot of this, I'm doing this because it's in my best interest. Okay, if you actually look at the brain and we know surprisingly little about it, but we also know a surprisingly decent amount as well.
Right.
And we know that there are these two parts of it in the sense that there's this narrating self, right? That you tell yourself that this is happening, and you kind of provide a rationale for all the actions that you do. And there's this experiencing self that that can't speak, but it feels everything, right? And your brain constantly tries to wrap a story around why your experiencing self is experiencing that. So the problem with this humanist perception of life, right, humanist religion, is that we trust our narrating selves, but sometimes ignore the experiencing self.
Yeah.
So who's to say that which is right? How do I know which part of you is the real part that is actually responsible for making the decisions? Is it the narrative self? And so a lot of the problems that he'll talk about this, right, is like a fantastic experiment by Kahneman, where they'll ask, there's two groups of people.
This is Daniel Kahneman.
Okay. Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yep.
Two groups of people. There's people in two groups. The first group will be putting their hands in water at, 14 degrees Celsius. What is that? 50, probably 45 degrees. Okay. Okay, so the first group of people is putting their hands in 45 degrees Fahrenheit temperature water for 60 seconds. Second group of people put their hand in water at 45 degrees Fahrenheit for 60 seconds. But then, I think it's for 90 seconds, but the final 30 seconds, the water temperature is increased by 1 degree Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius or whatever. So it goes to 46. And then the best part, what they're asked is, okay, if you had to do this again, which one would you do? Right? So from a pure experience, right, 45 degrees Celsius water, the 45 degree Fahrenheit water is cold, right? Both experiences are awful. The second one is a longer time in cold water. Sure, the water temperature increases, but by a pretty insignificant amount, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's still, if you just sum up the experience, your experiencing body was suffering more in the second one, right? But it's around 80 to 90% will say, I prefer the longer this thing. Just because the narrating self, the way it thinks about stuff is through the peak pain, right, which is how the worst that you felt, and the end. Right, at the end of the experience, how did you feel? So the application for this is in a colonoscopy, right, which is a pretty invasive procedure, right? You know
I
what?
would imagine so.
Right, yeah. So the question is, okay, how do you make it so that people feel less pain about it? And the way to do this is, a 5-minute colonoscopy versus a 10-minute colonoscopy. You would imagine that a 5-minute colonoscopy is probably like a better experience, right? Because it's just like less invasive.
It's shorter, yeah.
Yeah, it's shorter because it's less intrusive. But as long as like the doctor in the middle makes you feel a little bit uneasy, but towards the end is like really slow and really calm, the narrating self will actually tell you that the 10 minutes one was a lot better. Because that's the way it calculates sensation and emotions and stuff like that. So take this to the voting booth, right? You could have like 3 years of god-awful experiences with the government, but right at the 4th year, suddenly taxes are gone, government spending's everywhere. Yeah. You're in the voting booth. What do you remember? The great campaign bus ad that you just saw, or the 3 years of like really bad?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so the narrating self, that will is biochemical. It's pretty irrational, and more importantly, it can be gamed, right? In a certain sense, like now our
humans are now hackable.
Yeah,
that's something I really pulled from the book.
Yeah, and he relates this through the humanist agenda while tracing this religion. That's how he kind of arrives at this conclusion. They are hackable. The best example for this is the slew of medication that's just available, right, to make you feel a certain way or not a certain way. Which again, like there are good things, right? A lot of this is like progress, and a step in the right direction. I think there was an experiment in Israel that he'll cite about a person feeling, just clinically depressed, right? And the approach was to put a couple of sensors that kind of like prevent the communication between the part of the brain that feels that and cuts off the communication to the rest of the brain. What happened though, right? And it's a little chip that you put inside your brain. So he was feeling great. Now, a couple of months later, he came back. He's like, I feel worse than ever. They found out that the battery of that thing had just died, and all they had to do was replace that back to normal completely. It really, like, medical tech is incredible. But, like, once you get into, like, these biochemical reactions are algorithmic, right? In that they're deterministic. You can put step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and kind of describe the flow of this, right? And a lot of these, like, so I'm reading Behave by Sapolsky right now, and a lot of these neurobiological experiments, what they do is they capture these, like, fundamentals. I forget what they're called, but, like, whatever the MRI captures, right? Those, like, the flow of current in your brain that results in communication. And, some other fundamentals about hormone and blood pressure. And they're able to predict what you're going to do with about an 80 to 90% accuracy before you actually do it.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of this is like very algorithmic in nature these days, right? And so yeah, I mean, that's his point about the humanist agenda being gameable. So if we can design a better algorithm that makes more reliable decisions more consistently, that is truthful and correct and not confounded by this like narrative irrational sense of the experiences that you're making, why wouldn't our pursuit of that eventually replace this humanist religion that we have set ourselves?
So then it's like we become more machines if we're not making our own decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is where the techno-humanism part comes in.
Yeah.
So the techno-humanism is the like, okay, we realize there are ways to game this.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways that we can make our own designer babies. There are ways that you can prevent your muscles from atrophying if you undergo some bad injury or something like that. And you eliminate death to the point where it's not like unless you have an accident, right? Or it's like a very low chance that you'll die of natural causes or whatever it is. That's where that's the techno-humanism argument, where what we'll end up creating, according to him, are these two classes: the useless class which are the folks that don't have access to any of this, and then like everyone else, the superhuman beings. Now, one might argue, and this is another great line, one might argue is that the healthcare tech that the useless class has access to is going to be infinitely better than what we have access to today.
Right,
which is great. But, if you tell a farmer in rural Europe in the 1600s, hey man, I know that you hate this now, or in the 1700s, right? And I know you hate this now, but like, you're going to be working in a factory, it's going to be a lot better, you'll have pay. So your struggles now are for a good cause. Like, you're not going to care,
no.
Right? Like,
well, and he points this out, how big of an issue like wealth inequality is, because the wealthy will be able to afford to basically pursue immortality.
Right, yeah. So the question there is like, okay, who gets access to this? And then it's inevitably like it's going to be like the wealthy, right? So, again, inevitably is a strong word. I shouldn't say that. Like it's a distinct possibility that it would end up like that. And I think that's what I really like about this book, is that he's not a prophet, right? These aren't prophecies. These are just nuclear takes about how the pursuit of these humanist ideals will end up in scenarios that could eventually just uproot the humanist religion itself.
Yeah.
If the algorithms are better at making decisions, why do we need the useless humans?
Right.
Right? If we can all just pool our information, and gather much better information about potential pandemics, about car accidents and where to go and stuff like that, then why do we need the human aspect of it?
Like if we could just use the data to make our lives objectively better, why would we not do that? Yeah.
Right. And in doing that, I think the idea is that you're gonna end up in a state where, so for the dataism part, right, is the institutions that we have built, the liberal institutions that we've built that sanctify human desire, human emotion, human sensation, and place it at the top of what we should aspire to, will that hold up in an age where the collective human beings' data that we collect is the most important thing? Like, is democracy sufficient for dataism? Just like how the feudal system was insufficient for like liberty, fraternity, and equality, and we realized that's been the motto since, I'll get my dates wrong, 1779, or is that America? I don't know, whatever. Right? How that has been the motto for so long. Once there is this new religion so that's where liberalism came, right? That's where capitalism, communism, all of those spawned out of a change in religion. So if we enter this new religion of dataism, what are the institutions going to look like? Will democracy be able to hold up? Will we go back to like kings and monarchs, or will there be something else?
You would think they would be more efficient.
Yeah, but I don't think the current institutions would be more efficient, because they won't be able to keep up with the scale of decision making. So he's got this nice like section there. It's like, the government isn't the leader of what we need to think. It like manages us. Yeah, right. It prevents our sewers from draining and from overflowing, and makes sure that waste is managed. And well, they don't even do that, but like, right. So it's not the leader of kind of where we should go. It loses its say when we enter this dataism religion, and you kind of see some of this happening, right? Like I think with like COVID, you see that. Like Uber Eats still functioned, even though like the whole of the West Coast was on fire, right? Like, but like people still got food and delivery like that way, right? That was what kind of saved. And a lot of these are like, they're not obviously at the dataism, like, they're not at the level that Yuval describes them yet. They're still in their infant stages, but you kind of see shades of what he describes, I think, in the modern world, which is kind of what this book made me pay attention to. It opened my eyes to a lot of these things that are going on in the current world. And I think you're really right when you say, like, you change your behavior a little bit, right? Upon reading this book.
I've shifted. I would say this. I wasn't someone who really sought out knowledge on science and technology and biology and physics before I read this book.
Okay.
And then since then, I've really, I wouldn't say I've become obsessed, but I'm definitely more aware, and I want to know more information about all these different things.
Yeah.
Whether it's, it seems like in this book, I don't know where this is originally from, but like the big breakthrough of the first half of the 20th century was physics. And then the second half of the 20th century was information technology.
Okay.
And then now the 21st century, like the first half of it seems like it's going to be biotechnology.
Okay.
And driven by this idea, this new humanist agenda. People want to live longer, healthier, and happier. So the technology and investment is going into stuff like that.
Yeah, I would think that, like, so physics and like hard science.
Yeah. I'm going to make sure it's still recording.
Sure. And then I actually think that the second half of the 20th century had...
Say that again?
I think that the second half of the 20th century had psych and like, what do you feel? And unpacking the technology of your brain. Like, how do we quantify that and algorithmize it? And I think that towards the end of the 20th century, we did start getting the boom in the information age. But I would argue that 21st century start is the information age, right? We really, if you watch these like 90s shows, people will say lines like, wow, this internet thing is here to stay. I'm like, really? Like, and that it's bizarre to us, right? But really it is.
Okay, so what things are we experiencing right now that we'd be saying like, oh wow, this is here to stay?
This is here to stay.
That people in the future will look at us as like naive and.
My hot take there is the designer baby thing.
Okay.
I think that like every human tech like that, right, starts off but in the guise of saving lives, right?
Explain the idea of the designer baby thing, because I don't think everybody knows about this.
So a lot of it is okay. Have you heard of 23andMe?
Yeah.
So yeah, 23andMe is a service that it's a tube that you get and you spit in the tube. You ship it to Mountain Valley, California, and then you get an email that gives you every single disease genetically that they know and they can find that you could potentially contract. It was started by a former Googler, and that is useful information, right? So when I say designer babies, I guess I mean medical technologies that kind of enable this sort of insight. He's got this great story about Angelina Jolie that I wasn't aware of, but she announced to the world in some time, right, that she was going to get a mastectomy. And it is a dangerous procedure, right? But her idea was that she did a test that found that she had a gene that could potentially mean that she would get breast cancer. So the preventative way to do that is to get a mastectomy. And his whole thing is like, how did she make this decision? She didn't go watch the sunset, meditate, go on a trip to discover herself. No, she looked at an algorithm that said, hey, look, like, this is a possibility, so you should do this. And she made that decision, right? So we've already started kind of relying on, like, bio and biological information to make changes to our bodies. Designer babies is just kind of doing that for your kin. So this starts with, like, things like autism. So there are technologies now that can in utero help you figure out what or tell you if there's a chance whether your baby is autistic or not, or going to be autistic or not. And it does it. So what's the motivation for this? It's to better plan your pregnancy, right? Because it's hard raising an autistic child in the world. So this technology exists, right? And I think that designer babies will come in the sense of like, okay, you can prevent certain diseases. Why don't you turn off the color blindness gene? Why don't you potential deformity in the ring finger? We can fix that, right? Like ways that your child could be potentially hamstrung in the modern world, we can remove stuff like that. Like the natural extension of that is like, I want the smartest kid, the strongest kid, the most good looking, like whatever, right? But I think that like that tech for sure, it'll be something that we're saying, oh wow, that's really here to stay. Yeah, of course it will, because I think that like humanist goal here is happier, healthier, and live longer, right? So yeah, if we can tweak the kin to do that, of course we would do that, right?
So what about then CRISPR?
I've heard of this. This is the gene pool, right?
This is like the gene editing.
Oh, the protein that's really good at this, or the bacteria that's really good at this. Yeah,
I think CRISPR is the technology or the company.
So there's a specific type of bacteria that is. Oh, the science is crazy. Okay, there's a specific type of virus.
Science is crazy, man.
There's a specific type of virus that is lethal to bacteria, and it does it by finding a specific gene, I think, and replacing or putting its own gene over there, and that just kind of allows it to infect the bacteria, and then it'll always stay within that, because as the bacteria multiplies, that virus is always going to stay with it. Bacteria have a really amazing way of dealing with this, right? They have this certain enzyme that is able to go through every single one of its genes and identify that one exact foreign element and replace it and remove it so that it doesn't continue. We have figured out how to take that particular enzyme inside of bacteria to target specific genes. So that is CRISPR, I think, right? It allows us to
I think
zero in on a gene.
It's like looking
replace.
at humans as, like a computer, like it's ones and zeros, like the coding, like you can.
So
is that what it is?
I would use like a. Like if you imagine a human as a modular program, right, with a bunch of different functions that each of them do different things, CRISPR allows you to figure out exactly which function would be doing what, and then replace that with something else. So I think like the application of CRISPR is designer baby. And again, I use this term obviously like to describe all of that.
And this is kind of what Yuval kind of gets into is, so say we start editing. We have designer babies now, and they're healthier, and they're a little maybe stronger because they're not
and they live longer. Yeah, let's say all three. They're happier too.
At a certain point, there's just going to be us like regular people that were born.
Yeah. So this is I think Yuval's techno-humanist. So he's got and he does this really well. So I really recommend this book, folks. Like you really gotta read this. But again, he says this many times. The point is to broaden your perspective into all of these potential futures.
Yeah.
What are the humanist goals and objectives? Happier, stronger, healthier, and live longer. Okay. Does this particular technological revolution fit into that? Yes, it does. What would the end goal look like if this was achieved, right? And I think this is his techno-humanist prediction, which is the useless class and the class that has access or can pay for, or however it manifests itself in the future, right? Like, because I don't imagine this is something that would be covered under universal healthcare of any kind, right? But I don't know, like, you're essentially opening the door to this techno-humanist where you can literally make biological differences, something that was never available, right? No. But you can point your veins and say, hey, blue blood, that's why I'm better than you. Like you can potentially actually do that. So that's where the useless class would come in, is like the folks that don't have access to this. Sure, their lives might be a lot better. Maybe they have universal basic income. But there is...
He says like, before this, death and illness treated everybody kind of the same.
Yeah, the same, yeah.
And now it could potentially not.
Yeah.
Based on wealth, right?
I think based on wealth and... Well, so wealth because of capitalism, right? Or because of liberalism, or whatever, the wealth because of the institutions that we live with today. I think the question that he poses that I find more interesting is, can the institutions that we have today keep up with the pace of the technological revolutions driven by humanism? Okay, I said a lot there. What do I mean by that?
So he says, he goes through them, right? and he's like, Nazism didn't work, or fascism didn't work, socialism didn't work, communism, capitalism so far has worked.
So, and he'll also answer the question why, right? It's that I actually really enjoyed that section, and this kind of fits with like this larger thought that I think that I've been reading about. That's like, so what is the driving force of history? I think like technology. I think like it enables certain things, and if the thing that it is enabling, as long as the actors in the world game kind of react to that in the right way, then their ideology is the one that end up winning, right? So, so the communism argument is that data processing. I think this is that in Deus chapter he'll have that the key.
Real quick,
yeah.
Something I took away from the book is that like data processing. Yeah. And as a human, I'm an information processor.
Oh, okay. So yeah, what are the?
Go back to your thing. Go back to communism.
That is a good aside. Okay, so why? Okay, it was that centralized versus decentralized in terms of data processing. The four elements that so okay, if your religion is dataism, what is better? If you have more data points, if you have more people, right? If you have more connections between the people, if you have more different types of people, and then there's a fourth thing. I forget what the fourth thing is. But the idea is that the capitalist, what's the word, credence or whatever, the capitalist ideology embraced better data processing system. It was decentralized. The story goes, I think when Gorbachev went to the UK to understand what Thatcherism was and why it was so successful, he sent some emissaries to go there, and they spent the entire day walking around London and saying, hey, this. And the one thing that he said is hey, take me to a grocery store, because I've been to all these grocery stores and you guys have no lines for bread. But in Russia, we have so many lines for bread. So I want to meet the person who is supplying bread. Who is in charge of that?
Yeah, I remember this.
And the confused no, who's in charge of bread? What does that even mean? And it's so decentralized, right? It's to the whim of the consumer and the producers, and we leave it up to the market to kind of decide that. The idea being the market is the most efficient data processing thing that we know of. And so, from the lens of dataism, that's kind of why capitalism worked. As governments and stuff become more centralized and blockers for, I feel like I'm going to go on a blockchain rant apparently because I've been using the word decentralized all the time. Decentralized and distributed. But, okay. So yeah, another key aspect of that is the embracing of the technology of the time. The technology of the early 19th century supported centralized stuff. Let's have all the machines here and churn them out and make nuclear bombs. It was really good at that, but it wasn't good at figuring out what the price of bread should be or whatever.
Yeah.
However you want to view that. So yeah, that's the data processing side is neat. What I actually a weird thought that I had when I was reading that, and I'm going to open the book because I really want to see what the fourth thing is. It's driving me insane. I really liked how the tenets of dataism in terms of, okay, to be a better dataist, I need to improve my data processing in these four ways. That's actually exactly how the human brain evolved. More neurons, just more longer cells, more connections between neurons. I think it's either white or gray matter. I think it's gray matter, but gray matter is essentially the connections between cells. Sapiens has just a lot of that. More different types of cells. So the neuron is an incredibly complicated cell. There are all sorts of enzymes that control whether information flows from one neuron to the other, and there's all types of weird circuitry that even acts as a buffer. And whatever the fourth one is also is still in line with this. Okay, how the brain has evolved. I thought that was a really interesting, and I remember holding on to that.
Listen to the names of these chapter titles.
Okay.
So part 1, Homo sapiens conquer the world. So this is kind of
this is the summary of Sapiens. Yeah, summary of Sapiens.
The Anthropocene, the human spark. Okay, part 2.
Yeah.
Homo sapiens gives meaning to the word. Okay.
These are all the ideologies. All the religions are
This is
covered
the
here.
Storytellers, the Odd Couple,
We
the
need to be-
Modern Covenant, the Humanist Revolution.
Yeah.
Part 3, Homo sapiens loses control.
The
The time bomb in the laboratory.
bomb in the laboratory.
The great decoupling, the ocean of consciousness, and the data religion.
Yeah. So I think the final 2 chapters, the second to last is the techno-humanist one. The last one is the dataism. It's somewhere close to the dataism. It's got like 4 bullet points. I wonder if we can find it.
It's such a dense and heavy book.
It really is.
The quality of paper in this particular book is exquisite.
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah, feel this.
Yeah,
Is
right.
yours
It's really
as-
good. Yeah.
No, is yours
Yeah,
as
yeah.
heavy as this?
Mine is similar too. Like if you touch the pages.
Like, get it printed on, like, typically you would print, like, art
Mhm.
books with this type of paper.
Yeah. Well, it is an art book. You know, no. You know what? I'm not gonna go with that.
Information wants to be free. That's
Yeah.
one of the subheadings. Like capitalism, dataism.
Yeah, I found
too
it.
began in
So
there we go.
yeah. So from a dataist
What page
perspective,
is that?
it is 383.
Oh, okay. It's right there.
Yeah. You can interpret the entire human species as a data processing system, with individual humans serving as its chips. If so, you can understand the whole of history as a process of improving this system's efficiency through 4 basic methods. Increase the processors, increase the variety of processors, increase the number of connections, and increasing the freedom of movement along existing
Wait,
connections.
let's dive into
Yeah.
this a little further. This is, like, really simplistic and just, like,
Yeah.
really, it makes a lot
Intuitive.
of sense.
Really intuitive,
Yeah.
right? It absolutely makes sense. Is how do you make an entire system better? Have more actors, have more diverse actors, have these actors talk to each other more, and help these actors move around. Right? Like that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's take it a step further. Okay, so 1, increasing the number of processors. A city of 100,000 people has more computing power than a village of 1,000 people.
Exactly.
2, increasing the variety of processors. Different processors may use diverse ways to calculate and analyze data. Using several kinds of processors in a single system may therefore increase its dynamism and creativity. The conversation between a peasant, a priest, and a physician may produce novel ideas
Yeah.
that would never
Versus
emerge from a conversation between
3
three
hunter-gatherers, right? Yeah. So the way I feel like this is there in the brain is there are so many different types of neuron circuits that drive, say, how we experience pain, right?
Okay.
Or how we experience any kind of sensation. And just the sheer variety in that, I think, makes it such a complex organ in the body, right? And it's true about data as well, right? So I work in tech, and I feel like a lot of this is resonated with me in both, like, at a biological as well as a corporate level. So
Okay, 3, increasing the number of connections between processors. There is little point in increasing the mere number and variety of processors if they are poorly connected to each other. A trade network linking 10 cities is likely to result in many more economic, technological, and social innovations than 10 isolated cities.
yeah, this is
Makes
gray
sense.
matter in the brain.
4, increasing the freedom of movement along existing connections. Connecting processors is hardly useful if data cannot flow freely. Just building roads between 10 cities won't be very useful if they are plagued by robbers, or if some paranoid despot doesn't allow merchants and travelers to move as they wish. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what was your biggest takeaway from this book?
The biggest takeaway.
Like,
that's
how would you apply, or how have you applied what you read here moving forward?
I think so. Okay, Sapiens. I feel like this is a long-winded question just because I've read, like, both of them, and they seem, he's described human history, now he's describing human future. So with Sapiens, for me, like, every emotion or thought that I had, I would always trace back to, like, the myth or what
Yeah.
is the underlying story. Over here, like, I feel like I do it the same way. And Sapiens is, like, Homo Deus has made it kind of narrow now. Like, now that I know or now that I accept that humanism is the religion that I believe in, that, I or at least like, that I implicitly assume is true.
Yeah.
I stop at the thought and I again challenge that assumption first. I'm like, hey, like, is that really something that I want to do? And the same way the narrative and experiencing self, like the difference between your left and right side of the brain, like, because I feel like a lot of my life I make habits and I try to kind of abide by them, right? So I try to like, I'm very rigorous about like my practicing of music, for example, right? And I really try to spend an hour sometimes, and when I don't do it, like, I feel bad, but I'm like, maybe I've been doing it for too long. Maybe my experiencing self was really trying to tell me something there, and I should chill out for just a second and, like, maybe get back to it later. I think that it's, and I guess contrary to what he says, it's made me trust the algorithms less and pay attention to what I want more. Because I feel like I'm a biological creature at the end of the day, right? So I know that the algorithms could tell me what I want. I don't want to listen to the damn algorithms.
So do you think listening to the algorithm makes life less enjoyable or entertaining?
No, I mean, like, I think that you could argue that
takes out the randomness.
Sure. That might be a good way to do it, right? Because I think that, look, and there are a lot of people that are, like, a lot of logical people. I think it's a very rational thing to just listen to the algorithm, right? But I think that, like, the way I would rationalize listening to the algorithm would be like, okay, you know what? Living in Chicago makes absolutely no sense just because of rent and remote work. I need to just go outside and go live in a smaller place, and with all of that excess funds, invest heavily in actually pay for dating apps, because then you optimize those algorithms for you. Actually pay for a host of these other services that, like that. So with the, like, I feel like you could really, like, boil your life down to an Excel sheet then. And if I commit to the algorithms, like, I wouldn't be doing it right unless I did that. And so I don't want to do that, though. Like,
okay, so do you think there are going to be companies soon where it seems like people already just give away all their information and data?
Yeah.
So will there be companies that will say, hey, give us the data on your smartwatch, give us your Google, give us your internet browsing history, give us your blah, 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 and we'll put it together to give you a picture of who you are, or like what you should be doing, optimizing your life.
I think that like that's the end goal of Cortana or Siri or Alexa, right?
Like a life coach.
Yeah, like a life coach, exactly.
Like a data life coach.
Well, I definitely think that that's the end goal of, like, each of those tools, and I'm pretty sure that that's what Steve Jobs had in his head when he, like, announced Siri to the world, and then everyone just copied it. So, I think that we know the companies that are going to offer this, right? I don't think that that's too far-fetched at all. So, I agree with his, like, take that that's going to become a lot more commonplace with, like, hey, I just read all your emails. Before you send this, your blood pressure's a little high, and when you're a little angry, you don't write the best emails. So maybe take a walk. And, like, it's
Jarvis.
Exactly. Jarvis, right? Yeah.
Tony Stark's
vision, right? Yeah.
virtual assistant.
Paul Bettany in the MCU.
So I remember there was a part where it talks about wealth is not actual resources. Wealth is knowledge. So he talks about, like, the Middle East, like, fighting for physical resources, but, like, in the future, it's all about wealth and knowledge and information. So, like, Silicon Valley companies, it's the information that they can sell that's...
So I think this is the knowledge equation that what he'll do is, and this is another, like, I just love this guy because he distills these complicated concepts in a very intuitive way. But I wish I can remember exactly what... Okay, so knowledge in the religious age, where the atheist or the theist age is scriptures multiplied by maybe a little bit of logic. knowledge in the scientific age. Okay, so what we mean by that is take all the scripts that we have, all the pages of the Bible, all the pages of the Gita, whatever it is, and apply some logical interpretation to it, and this is how you become wise.
Yeah.
In the scientific age, it is observation and experimentation, I think. Or maths, I believe math and logic, or math and experimentation.
Okay.
In the current age, in the humanist age, it is emotion and sensation. What do you feel, and how do you maximize that, right? You take in all the inputs from your senses, you take in all the emotions that you feel, and then you are more knowledgeable about yourself, right? And like pursuing, like think about the amount of reflective essays you wrote in your school growing up, right?
Yeah.
What was the point of that? It's to get in touch with your senses and your emotions, right? Because we think that having that info makes you wiser. But in the information age, I don't think he has a knowledge equation, though I think we could come up with one, right? It would be like data lines, or like volume of information multiplied by, well, it could be both those four things in the data processing, right? The amount of the information you have and how good the algorithm is.
I don't know. We're starting to get late in the podcast, and now all the things we're talking about is like.
Well, it's starting to get late in the day too, right?
Yeah. As
hey,
man,
you're
you
watching
had that.
You had that coffee, so
yeah. It's like now we're. All the technology and equations are going through my head, and they're not calculating as. They're not processing as efficiently as they were an hour ago.
Sure. Fair, yeah. I guess, yeah, in summary, I kind of want to go back to your question about like how I have changed like a little bit into, or what I guess I take back from this book. You know, I don't think a lot of my behaviors have changed, but I think I've become a little bit more suspicious, for sure. Like just of a new technology, like what is the end goal? How does it tie to the humanist agenda? And what is the dystopian scenario? Like, ask yourself those questions, right? About something. It's not something that we do because we consume so much in today, right? There's just like a saturation of content that we're just overblown with. Oh, he has this great quote, right? What's the word? It's censure, not censure. Censorship. Yeah, censorship in the medieval ages was not telling the masses something. Censorship in the information age is overflooding you with stuff so you don't know what to think.
Oh, yeah.
What a brilliant quote that is, right? And so I think that, being more deliberate about what I choose to consume, just because he really broadens your perspective about technology and the way you live your life. So I think that's probably the biggest take back for me from reading this book.
Yeah, an excellent book.
Excellent book.
Excellent book.
I did want to add one thing. I know that you mentioned that he has 2 books. He's the author of 3 books. 21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
Have you read that one?
I have not read that one.
See, I have.
Okay.
And I think it's a watered down version of this.
Oh. Okay.
I think it's for. No offense. I think it's for people who can't really grasp more dense concepts.
Yeah, and he tackles a pretty tough subject, right? Like, I mean, if you think about Sapiens...
I'm suspicious, for the record.
Yeah.
I'm suspicious...
For the record. Hold up.
I'm suspicious of any books that do, like, numbers. 21 lessons for the 21st century.
Wait.
15 steps to this, or 9
Why?
things. I think it's...
A cop-out?
A little bit of a.
I have only 9 things to say. Right?
It's not as it's trying to spoon feed me, but I'm not a baby.
Okay.
I'm a grown man. I can extract the information and knowledge.
I think
without having a.
You're a strong, independent man, and you don't need no author to tell you.
That's right.
Damn straight. All right.
Yeah, I think it's a little watered down.
They're prescriptive, right? They're and I actually do agree. I think that I don't like. I don't think any of us like being told what to do, right? And some of those feel very prescriptive. So actually, one of my least favorite books in the world is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because I just feel like it's this old dude telling me like, "Hey man, this is how you can be a millionaire." I'm like, dude, shut up! Like, God damn it, I am sick of you. I don't know if you've read this book, but
I've read the book. I know a lot of people that have found a lot of value from it.
Yeah,
I think it is outdated though in its concepts.
Yeah. I agree. We're not gonna add that to the next book that we do on this podcast. So
anyways, this has been Homo Deus. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're gonna pick another one soon. What you want to do? A history of future cities or a billion Americans?
We could do. I want to do A Billion Americans because I've heard good things about the book. We can leave it up to the fans as well. That would be pretty cool. But
this is not a democracy. The data has shown me that A Billion Americans will be the next one.
Okay, yeah, Matthew.
It's not a democracy yet. So, yeah, it'll be A Billion Americans. We'll do another book podcast on that.
Sounds good.
Again, thanks for listening.